All right. I think it is 6:05 by my watch, so we'll go ahead and get going. Hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Martledge, and I am the community advocate for Friends of Figma San Diego. Just a little bit about Friends of Figma. I'm excited to see there are a lot of people that are first time, never heard of Friends of Figma, first time joining a Friends of Figma event. I'm very excited and to have you here. We are a free community that is all around the software product Figma. For those who've never used it, check it out. It's free. You can get started for free. I highly recommend it. If you've used Sketch or XD or Photoshop, you should check out Figma. I think you're really going to like it. And I think today's panel will be particularly interesting if you're making a transition to Figma or you're considering jumping in with both feet. So a little bit about us. I'm Aaron Martledge again. This is the link. You can click on this. I really encourage everybody to join the FigJam. So FigJam is a product that is from Figma. It's in beta right now. It's a whiteboarding tool. This entire panel will be guided by FigJam. So you can join or keep posting the links into the chat. So if you miss it, it'll come back around or ask for it. And the link, you can just sign up or you can join anonymously. If you sign in, you can actually add to it. So everybody will have edit permissions. You'll be able to kind of contribute. This is an experiment. We'll see how it goes. I don't know. We'll find out, but hopefully it'll go well. So thanks to everybody to join. And then of course I have to promote our upcoming events. So we have 2 events on the calendar right now. We have a September meet and greet. This is an in-person event that'll be up at Karl Strauss and Sorrento Valley. It's just you come out, have a beer, meet some people, some other Figma folks and other designers. It'd be great to have you. We are looking for a sponsor for that event. So if anybody's interested in having their company sponsor, we'd be pleased to talk about that. And then in October, we just announced this. We finally have everything coordinated. Our October panel will be Figma at Scale and how big company design teams are leveraging Figma to create fantastic products and services. The panelists for that will be a member from Amazon AWS, HP, ServiceNow, and Intuit. So talking about how that works there. So we're trying to put out a lot of quality products that you want to come and attend. And I think we have a great one today. And with that, I will turn it over to Antonio, and he will walk you through SDXD. So Antonio.
Of course. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for the introduction. And thanks, Friends of Figma, for doing this with us. Also, thanks to Viasat. So let me tell you a bit about SDXD to everyone. So yeah, we're San Diego Experience Design, SDXD. We're a community of over 4,000 UX practitioners and enthusiasts across the world. And we gather regularly once a month to exchange topics and learn from each other and communicate and network. So thanks for being here. And I got a shout out to my board, the SDXD board that you can see down there in the FigJam if everybody's in there. This is awesome, by the way. And we do have a couple announcements as well. Feel free to join our Slack. We have a Slack community that's growing and we do job postings. We also post about future events and we are all, the whole board is hanging out there. So if you have any questions or if you want to reach out, we're always available there. So please feel free to join the Slack. The link is in the FigJam. And last but not least, future events. We do have a future event for San Diego Design Week this year. It's on September 9th and with Shiva Najmi. And she was a past speaker. It was an awesome talk on how she worked on a LinkedIn feature. And this is creating citizens focused on smart cities. And you can follow the event link there and sign up from there. So look forward to seeing you there as well. And it'll be a good one. So with that, I think that's it for me. I'll hand it over to Viasat. So I'll hand it over to Neil to introduce the panel.
That's great. Thank you, Antonio. Really appreciate the intro. Thank you, Aaron and the Friends of Figma San Diego team. Really excited to be part of the community as it grows. And thank you to everyone for joining. It's great to see so many names I recognize and people interacting in the FigJam too. So my name is Neil McIver. I'm a member of Viasat's Customer Experience Research and Design team. My role this evening is really to get out of the way and let the rest of the members of the Viasat team who are here on the panel share more with everyone about the details of our team's tools stack journey over the last 18 months or so. So however, before we do that, I thought I'd give everyone a quick overview of Viasat and the Customer Experience Research and Design team who work there in order to hopefully help provide some context for everything else you're about to hear about today. So if you're in the Fig Jam and you want to follow me around, and I know Aaron will, but if you want to follow me around, just so you know, there's a feature at the top right where you can select on an avatar. If you want to know what my avatar looks like, I'm just going to make it really big for a moment. That's my avatar, and then I'm going to get rid of it. But if you click on that, you can kind of follow me around as I scroll around the Fig Jam a little bit. Okay, so let's start with Viasat, right? Just so everyone knows, Viasat is a global communications company who believes that everyone and everything can be connected. But more specifically, we're an internet service provider who provides internet via satellite. So, as you can imagine, being a designer at Viasat, it presents a lot of complex global challenges and opportunities, while we like to ensure we're crafting bespoke experiences. So at Viasat, we find better ways to deliver connections with the capacity to change the world in multiple contexts. So by context, think about on the ground. So we provide internet to homes and businesses in rural or remote areas. In the air, so we provide internet to commercial and business aviation partners. So think about last time you were on the plane and you connected to the internet, probably Viasat. And at sea, so think about, when you're on a cruise ship or even on an oil rig, if you need connectivity, it's likely our service that you're connecting to. Okay, so the Customer Experience Research and Design team, we're one team within Viasat, and we're the ones that get to design all of the great products and services for our customers. Our team is structured around the business segments and therefore around the customers that they serve, like you can see here. We're a growing team, as you can see. We have a number of openings right now across all of our groups. The members of our team you're meeting today are mainly going to be part of the corporate design system and operations team who work across the whole organization. And really quickly as well, we wanted to highlight the fact that we're growing our global footprint with designers across all of the US. We've got designers in Europe and also around South America. If you want to learn more about CXRD specifically, you can check out our team's website, which is design.viasat.com. Okay, so hopefully you get the idea that when we're looking at our design tool stack or even our design system, it's covering a very diverse set of team members working on bespoke solutions to diverse problems across many, many contexts. Okay, so really quickly, I'm going to move back up to the top of the Fig Jam. You'll see that this is the panel we've got today. We've got Ramin Shari, who's our lead product designer for design systems. You're going to hear from Joel Pinell as well, who's a product and visual designer in the design system team. You'll also hear from Cole Benson, who is a lead product designer, design ops. But without further ado, I will step aside and I will hand over to our moderator for the evening, who's going to keep us all honest and keep the conversation flowing. Chantel, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, everyone. Hi, my name is Chantel Liu. I'm one of the board members at SDXD, and I'm currently working at Zoom as a UX designer. So I will be the moderator tonight, ask a question for our panelists. And here are just some housekeeping items I want to talk about. So we're gonna start our panel very soon. And at the end, we will also have live Q&A. So if you have any questions, you can either type in the chat or we'll use our Fig Jam to post your question, which I will show you how to do that in a few seconds. And we also will have the closing marks, announcements, and we'll have optional post-event networking. So if you want to hang out with us, get to know each other more, you're welcome to do so. So here's how our Fig Jam set up. I see right now we only have 17 members in this file, and we have like over 57 audience right now. So if you haven't joined this big jam, you can find the link in the Zoom chat. And once you are in here, you can see here's our space. You can just copy paste this thing and kind of write something about yourself, tell us your fun fact, just introduce yourself, and kind of also use this space to play around the FigJam to see how Figma works. I saw some people are already doing that. Great. And if you move right, there's also a place for you to post your questions. So during the during our panel, if you have any question for our panelists, you can here just drag a post note here and type your question here, or you can also just old school add a text box and start typing a question this way, either way. And we also set up some place for you to take notes if you have any comments, thoughts, or just want to have some fun. You can use those space to use this space to play around with the FigJam. And we are going to divide our panel in 3 sections today. First, we'll talk about the history, what life was like before they switched to Figma. And then we'll talk about the transition. And at the end, we will talk about the present, which is how the Figma help us doing the work today. So this is how our FigJam is kind of set up. So if you can, I saw already a lot of people playing around the tell us about your section, which is great. Just have fun, guys. But we're gonna get started with our panel. So I personally use like Figma like on a daily basis. But I checked out today, I found like Figma was like the first public version of Figma was released just like 2016, which is just like 4 years ago. So it's not a long time. So I'm just curious about our panelists. What kind of design tools did you use before switch to Figma, both at Avesta and in your previous job?
Sure. Hello, everybody. So I think I start by giving you a little bit of history. I've been at Viasat for just over about 2.5 years now. And when I joined the team, it was a sketch shop. So they were using Sketch, InVision, and Miro was our design stack. But and I had a history. The company I came from, I was using Sketch, and before that, I was using Photoshop at my company before that. So when I came on, I was very familiar with Sketch, very comfortable. One of the things I noticed right away when I got to Viasat was we didn't have an easy way, though, to share or discover files or libraries for that matter, because we didn't have like other companies. I had always used Dropbox as a great way for us to have library sets, build out buttons and fonts, font collections and things like that. So without Dropbox, it made it really hard. So I remember one of our panelists, Joel, who's on the line as well. First times I met him, I would notice we were both really into design systems. And so he's like, hey, I'll email you these libraries. So that's really the space we were in, right? We were emailing libraries back and forth. We would make changes and then they would just become disconnected pretty much instantly. So to solve that problem, the reason I'm talking about this is we really needed to come up with a good way to start sharing our files, and we weren't going to be able to use Dropbox. So we looked into using Abstract to solve that problem. So Abstract was really popular for a lot of mature teams that were using Sketch. And so rather than looking too seriously at Figma, we really thought, hey, we can really hopefully get on Abstract pretty easily. We'd get version control, which we quickly realized would be great for design systems. It had features for like collections and really nice commenting. To me, that was very similar to what I had used in Zeppelin, which I liked a lot to use with Sketch. And also it just gave leadership really good visibility. It was going to give leadership really good visibility into accessing our files. So I don't know, anybody else want to add anything to that?
And all the files in the organization, everybody was using Sketch. So Abstract was just kind of the normal kind of path to kind of share our file, to just put all of them in a cloud system like Abstract. So that's how we started.
Yeah, and we started to really operate like one team, right? Like as Neil posted in the or mentioned at the very beginning, right? Our team is one team, and that really brought us together to start operating on the same level and start cross collaborating more.
Yeah, I can definitely feel the pain points you guys been through, like unable to share files, like unable to like control like the versioning, and also a great way to collaborate with your teams, and also the leadership. Like I can see that a lot of challenges with like the regular design tools. I think we've all been there. Like I personally start my design journey by using like Photoshop, learn a variety of like design tools come up. Also Adobe XD, yeah, just like a lot of tools, but like Figma now becomes most popular in terms of like the collaboration. But I'm still just curious, like, is there anything you miss about like Sketch or Abstract?
Well, not a lot, I would say. I mean, when we did get into using Abstract, I really did like the concept of version control. It enabled you to make, so if you're working in the abstract way, the master equals production. So I go in, I make a change. Once I release those changes and merge them back up to master, I can always make sure that whatever is on the master sketch file matches what is in production for my application. But I think that came with quite a bit of overhead as well. And then as far as what I missed from Sketch, right? Like all the shortcuts we knew, right? We had to like I mean, fortunately, there's a lot of global shortcuts, which are similar across, I find, most applications. But, we had to go find new plugins, for example, or, learn new techniques in a new application.
Yeah, exactly. That definitely sounds like a learning curve. I can imagine when you transition from Sketch to Figma, especially like there's no concept called like frame in Sketch, and a lot of things like this you have to learn like from scratch. And I'm just curious for you guys, like how did you hear about Figma? Like, do you have any personal experience before Versa started using Figma?
Yeah, I mean, as a team, we're always trying to, like, we're always evaluating tools. The tools are constantly changing, and so part of our, initiatives and processes, we are constantly evaluating tools, right? So this was just, while there is a number of, resources and there's bubbling up in the community of people talking about Figma, right? So it's we just do our due diligence consistently. So if there's going to be something, Figma's here now, there's going to be something else, and that we just, bake that into our process. But, some team members had used it before and were advocate for it. Yeah, just keeping up with current trends and continuing to evaluate. So reading articles, the community members, that kind of thing.
Great. So let's talk about the transition. So once you guys decide to move to the Figma, what's the transition like? It's like you immediately start moving everything to Figma, or like slowly like building out a library in Figma and then ask the whole company move there? Like what's the process look like?
Yeah, the first thing that we did was we stood up a squad, and that squad was put from a diverse group of skill sets and perspectives, and that squad was then tasked to basically we all kind of went off and piloted it independently, did tutorials, read articles, and then we all came back, right, and synthesized all that information. So that was the first step. Was I think if there's a nugget there, right? It's find a group of people who are able to devote a certain amount of time to looking at what a transition would be, and then continuing to do activities. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, I mean, and we didn't have exactly an agenda for piloting it, but I will say I probably spent 2 weeks just tweaking it as hard as I could, right? Like, what is auto layout? What can it do? How far can I push this? How do style overrides work compared to Sketch? what is prototyping all about, and just getting our hands on every tutorial article we could get our hands on, so that we knew we had a design system partially starting to build up in Abstract. And if we were going to go ahead and be moving this, we wanted to make sure. I mean, I had heard a lot of good things, so I was confident it was going to be great. But we really do want to do our due diligence and really understand what the tool set was going to do to our current libraries once we had to rebuild them.
That's great. Seems like this is a great learning opportunities for all the designers at Vansa. But I can imagine like the transition didn't happen overnight. Like there was definitely a moment where you have Sketch and Figma exist at the same time. You have to get some job done in Sketch for production, but at the same time you have to building out a design system, start picking up everything in Figma. So when the two design tools both exist in the company, like did you guys find anything challenging, and how did you guys solve that issues?
Yeah, we didn't. That really was the point of the squad. We didn't introduce Figma as a wider. I mean, obviously, any designer could just go and sign up for Figma. It's not like it's a secret, but we didn't introduce this as a concept of a transition until I think we felt that we were really comfortable that this would be a positive change for the team. So while we had as you're mentioning, while we had a bunch of projects in flight, there was a number of different steps that we went through, which we could talk about, that it wasn't a light switch, and it's still not a light switch, right? We're still onboarding teams.
Yeah. It's a general evolution over, right? We handpicked projects that made sense to say, hey, we think we can get these projects at the point they're at. It makes sense to put this project into Figma right now and leave these projects in Sketch, because just doing it, turning that light switch, to me, that would just be a virtual impossible. It'd just be impossible. So I think, and also it was a main goal of ours as well. We don't want to take designers who are reliant on some basic components and style tokens and then put them in Figma, and now they have no style tokens. Then we would lose all the progress we had made on trying to, bring everything together more. So we wanted to make sure we could provide that same set again before we would start inviting more team members in.
That totally makes sense. The next question I want to ask everyone in the panel, like what's the biggest challenge during the transition for you, and what's the biggest lesson learned during the transition? We can start with Cole.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge is, many of the team members were experts in Sketch, and I think this is just building off what Ramin was just saying, that it was a very familiar tool, and I think that just saying, okay, this is what you're using now, it's quite a shift, right? And there's a number of different things that that you need to sort of think about when you're asking someone to completely switch tools. So getting team members up to speed, that's been a challenge for sure. And then rebuilding libraries, the Sketch import isn't great. So rebuilding all those libraries that we made progress with Abstract, that is definitely definitely a challenge. We could probably speak more to that on the design system side.
Yeah, well, and you also said, what are the lessons learned and what were the challenges? I mean, it was bittersweet rebuilding the libraries, right? Because we haven't had a design system for a long time at Bicep. So I think both, and I'll let Joel speak to it after, but we both looked at it like, hey, this is an opportunity to get the things right that we may think or thinking of a little differently now. I mean, the tool's different too. So it enabled us to do different setups for the typography kit. And then we also use it as an opportunity to say, hey, like, we want, Bicep needs to be AA compliant for accessibility. We need to bake this in from the atomic level, right? We want to take our style tokens. We want to take our font tokens. We want to be able to get our font weights and the way we're naming everything and put that governance around that. So when designers start building things with these atomic pieces, we can get them out of the gates being accessible by giving like really good guidelines. So we actually have surfaces that if you use a particular font and you use the particular surface token that we have available, you're just going to be accessible no matter what. You're not even going to have to open up the Stark app and check your ratios because we've already baked it into the system. So it was a really cool opportunity to say, hey, remember that thing we did a year ago? I bet we have got some good lessons learned, and now let's do it over, but let's do it better.
Yeah, and when you read article about people who want to transition the way they are working to kind of bring a design system, you are building a design system while you are still kind of working on some product. And each story you hear, it's always kind of a big lift to kind of, to start to have a design system, to sell the concept to the leadership, to be sure everybody understands what that means. And for us, on the top of it, we just decided to change a tool in the middle of it. So when you read all the experience, that it's always kind of a challenging, and on the top of it, we kind of decided when we were kind of, starting to make progress that we are going to change the tool. That kind of complicated a bit the thing. But yeah, I think it was it's like everything was kind of new and scary. When you look back after, you just kind of learn something from the experience. And during the design system in Sketch, we did not lose much because the concept of design system is the same. We just took the opportunity to use Figma to kind of rethink the way we did build some of the component and learn from what we learn and do it better. So I think it was bittersweet, as Ramin said. It was complicated and maybe a little bit kind of discouraging at the beginning, but we were all supporting each other, and we knew that I knew it was a positive move.
And I like to say Neil's not allowed to suggest a design stack change within the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that I'll jump in there. I'd say there is a big lesson learned there, right? When we made the change, when we were Sketch and we added Abstract to our design tool stack, that was a big lift for the team, and that was a responsibility that I took in terms of working with the team and saying, yes, we're going to do this, and we did it. But then also, within 6 months, setting up that initiative to look at Figma and question again, have we made the right choice? Is there another opportunity? And I'd say a big lesson learned for me is just how great the team were in terms of receiving the fact that, okay, you know what, we were going this way, but we are going to pivot. And I think that it talks to what a great team we have. I think it talks to how flexible designers are and open to change and open to opportunity like that designers can be, right? It can be scary, but I think one of the great things that we did was there was a lot of change management that we considered in terms of how we were going to make sure the team were happy. Sorry, my dog's trying to get in now, so I'll shut up for a minute.
Great, thanks for sharing, everyone. Seems like design system has been mentioned many times during the challenge. Which leads to my next question it's more like a technical question, like how did you build out the design system in Figma? Did you kind of design all the elements from scratch, or is there a way to import some design elements from Sketch?
Yeah, it's 100% from scratch. So I took one look at importing and immediately decided that was not going to happen, and Joelle and I both agreed with that. And I really think when you building something from scratch, atomically up, gives you the opportunity to learn all the styles. I get how all the tool really works. So I didn't look at it as like, oh gosh, I got to go reset the fonts again. First of all, fonts in Figma are a dream, because if you've set up a design system in Sketch, you know that if you don't want to have force overrides for center, left, and right, you need to set up each font style 3 times. A nightmare, especially to maintain for anybody who's actually maintained a system like that. So that went away right away. So there was these little moments of joy that were happening as we were making the system. And then those moments were like getting me super psyched, being like, hey, Photoshop was good a long time ago, but dang, things have come a long ways, right? So Figma was just really great for that. So yeah, we did build it from the ground up, but we had designs to reference because none of that work was, we didn't leave that work behind. We just made it better.
Yes, there were two issues to import what we have done in Sketch. The first one is, I think when you import a file which has all the components in the file and you import it in Figma, it's working pretty well. I mean, for example, the color did work pretty well, but any kind of like the design system is just a bunch of external library. So you are losing all the link. So when you import something complex like this, you are just losing everything. So some color are translating, some are not. And so you don't know what is right and what is not. So it was clearly kind of impossible. On the top of it, because it was a new tool for us, importing thing, you are basically leaving behind you a bunch of shit that you didn't know why it was there, how it got there, and you cannot build a design system where the foundation will be as shaky as it would have been if we just kind of rely on that. So building was a little more kind of, okay, we start again, but it was a way to learn the tool and to be sure that the foundation that we were building was solid and was a good good foundation basically.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I can imagine if you just import one sketch file into Figma and then you lose all the links and the symbols, I think everything can get messed up. So definitely how to build something from scratch. And also to Rumin's earlier point is like, if you bake everything in your everything for accessibility into your design system, like everything can become so like easier and really fast to build out things after that. And next question I also want to ask everyone is like, where did you find the resources or like learnings to help you transition to Figma? I know Figma offers a lot of great tutorials and also how the Figma community here, but is there any resources or tips you'd like to share with someone who is thinking of transitioning to Figma or experiencing transition to Figma?
Yeah, I mean, so as you said, yeah, Figma has great documentation, and their YouTube channel is awesome. They've done a really good job with creating bite-size, info, and you can also look at it the technical side, but also the larger, like how they work with teams, developer handoff, bringing in stakeholders. So they did a great job on the spectrum of looking at how to best transition. So definitely would recommend going to the YouTube channel and the help articles. Also, there's a lot of passionate people in the community. Medium's a great resource. And cracking open the actual community, their community feature now. We've leveraged a lot of stuff in there, some stuff from Spotify, to sort of start building some templates and tools in there. Yeah, so I'd say, and then shout out to Aaron, who's been helping us, with some of our questions in setting up design systems, and that Aaron has been a huge help for that. So thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, I'll jump in and add one more. The one thing I did see is in the team, there was a lot of team support for one another when we made the choice. Obviously we set up Slack channels about Figma Swarm, so that if anyone had a question or anyone learned something, they could share it with the rest of the team. So that really helped us as an internal team within the organization. That was huge.
Yeah, and we had a great call with Aaron. That was, I can tell you, Aaron, that was very helpful when we walked through how to build components and think about some of the nesting with variants. So appreciate that.
Joy, do you have anything to add?
Well, just, the concept that you are coming out of school and you're going to kind of start your working life at Ford and leave 60 years later with a retirement, this thing is over. Especially for designer, I think we need to constantly be ready to learn not be concerned about the new thing we're coming, but embrace the change. We, obviously we are living in like technology accelerate, and I mean today we are learning Figma, and I will not be surprised that in 2, 3, 4, 5 years we all need here to learn something else. So it's just I'm maybe a little older than anybody here, but Photoshop, when you want to learn Photoshop, was a book. Now with the video, all the support online, it's just a piece of cake to learn something new. You have a question, you Google it or you search, you have a video, someone has already got the problem. So, there's no excuse anymore to just not be ready to learn something new.
Great, thanks for sharing. And the next, I'm just curious to know, like earlier you guys said, like you didn't like switch to Figma at like a full organization level. We just started with a small team to kind of implement it and experience with it. So I'm just curious to know, how did you work with other design teams within your large organization who maybe hasn't fully switched to Figma yet?
Yeah, so we did, one tip there is definitely bring the team along. I can share something here, but we did a number of sort of lunch and learn kind of things where we would talk through and then, through specific milestones, and one being like talking through the really what makes Figma cool. Like here, let me just share this just real quick. Yeah, so part of this is like, David McEnroe, that was part of the squad, did a really good audit of like looking at this sort of this tool stack that we were running up against, and if we could really make Figma a single source of truth, right? But this was kind of a quick presentation that we gave where we just kind of walked the team through, hey, this is what's really cool. Like there's open design, you can do communication and collaboration, right? And had some GIFs kind of playing. And did some feature highlights on auto layout and component variants and styles and overrides, and all the stuff that would power up your sort of day-to-day, designing, and then cross-function, like what makes it really cool with working with stakeholders and product managers, right, and prototyping. So this is just kind of a quick preview of like the point being like bringing the team along. So again, we set up a couple of these lunch and learns. And people can join and ask questions and really kind of starting to socialize this idea that we would be making the switch and getting people excited about it, right? That's really the goal, is getting people excited.
Yeah, that's a great approach, like being an advocate for Figma within the organization and bring more people on board. It's a great strategy. And since you are sharing the screen, like I think all the audience and I very interested in seeing your like current design system in Figma and how you guys set up everything. Would you like to share with us?
Do you have something up, Ramin?
Yeah, I can pull some up. 1 second.
Let me just piggyback. Oh, you got it up already. Never mind.
Yeah, so over here we have Beam Design System, and so this is our folder called the Foundation. So we're building our responsive web kit right here, and then we tear out some of our other kits like our illustrative icons, our material icons, outline. Those are separate files. But kind of one thing that we do is before we do any of our work, we basically have a file and this file actually gets pretty messy. This is our research file. So this is where we're going to come in. We're going to do a whole lot of research. So if I'm going to take on building alerts next and TOAST, I'm going to go and I'm going to see what the major design systems are, how other popular apps are using that. And then I'm going to go through, my ideation of coming up with some things before I get some feedback from designers. And then we kind of keep going down that process. And then that's when we start building something into the responsive web kit. So here you can see we're not too far along. We have these green, they represent things that we consider ready. We're not actually using version control, which is in beta now for Figma. Maybe it's out of beta, I'm not sure yet. I just haven't had the bandwidth to really take that on. So here you're looking at what I would call our sticker sheets for our style tokens. So this is going to show you like our headings and our paragraphs. Excuse these red lines, those are for developers. This is going to be all our links and our color styles for using fonts and the examples of them. And, so we try to do two things, right? When we set up tokens and components, we're going to set up those things. And then we're going to also write some usage guidelines. We're going to make sure we're exposing all the states that you're going to need, so the developers have everything they need. I mean, a crazy file, I'll just do a little hover over here. This is Joel's working on forms right now. Just a monster project that Joel's doing an amazing job at. So you can imagine building all those components. There's a lot of work there. Of course, you have your color file and what we call surfaces. So any questions that we only have we're in the works on like 4 or 5 other components right now. And then also in the works of starting to build it as an actual product that will be a full stack design system
and
from design to code.
And one of the reasons we are not using branching yet in Figma is because we are kind of really going as fast as we can. There's not that many people. I mean, some people starting to use some of the component, but some of them, there's some little bit of warning, like, you can use them, but they are still changing. But when we will have, enough component and people will start to really pull all these components in their design, then we'll absolutely use branching to be sure that we don't, not only branching, but branching and the right level of communication to inform people when we are going to make any change.
Great.
Yeah, and so here you'll see a setup left to right, where basically when we start, we usually build like what we call templates that we can get as much reuse out as possible. So if we're going to have a variant that you see, I have this variant here that has, I don't know, like maybe 80 variants or something. We build these templates so that if we want to change the radius, or this morning I decided I wanted to add a hover state to the close icon, I can go ahead and just add that into the template, and then that will nest into all my variant components so that I don't have to break anything or do shift selects on 80 items. Both Joel and I are big proponents of having templates that can enhance the speed at which you can work. And then down here, that would be the variant sheet. Then we make sheets these are called the guideline sheets. These are going to show everything that they can do. And then we would add like do's and don'ts for the design system. And then of course, examples of usage in the interface. So we don't have this all worked out, right? A lot of this we're working out as we go, and we did some of this last time. But what I find with anything in my career is the more I do it, the better we get, right? You just got to keep at it and keep learning, and each time you build a design system, you just get that much better.
This looks great, so beautiful. And you have from like the basic components to variants all the way to like a full page templates, which I think is like really helpful for the whole design team to use. And I'm just wondering, can you show us maybe a quick demo, like how you can pull those components together, like how easier to use a design system compared to Sketch?
Yes, I was not planning on it, so hopefully nothing goes wrong. I can show you something pretty cool here, but I just built this the other day. So this is a page that's embedded in a smart layout frame. So all of these have been set up with smart layout. So I think some of you will appreciate this when you add something to a page. Super annoying, right? When you have to go edit it, but not if you have smart layout, because as soon as you take it out that item, it just rolls out. And so these pages that we built, each time I add a line of text, all this is componentized. So if I want to add a new line of text right here, I can just copy it. I can use my arrow keys and then place it where I want, but I don't want that, right? So it becomes very powerful to use auto layout. So I can come in here, I can say, well, I really want the arrow at the bottom, which we wouldn't want. I can come in and I can easily change to dark mode if I was working in dark mode. Or I can easily just go ahead and change the state. So over here on the right, I've set up all my variants. I can turn the close on and off. If I want to do a combo, a button only or a combo, I can just turn those things all on. So those have all been pre-programmed in the variant, essentially. so that once the designers now accept this, I haven't actually released this component yet, but once they do, they will have all these options available to them. And then the design system, we will build this component. So when a designer goes and puts this error, this success message into their application, the developers will already have it ready within the design system to use. So that is how we'll do it, you know, the end-to-end tracking with the design system.
Wow, this is awesome. Like it's really easier to use and definitely save us a lot of time. And since you have like really like solid big design system here, I'm also curious to know how the design team work on this. How the design team collaborate on the design system. Do everyone contribute to the design system, or do you have like separate team or person manages the whole system?
It's a great question. You know, we definitely are working at collab. We want to allow for a collaboration across the team and contribution. And so I will say in the beginning, I think we really tried to kind of like consensus design, and that didn't work so well, to be honest. But I think once you reach a space where with Joelle and I are both working on the design system, we are passionate about getting feedback from the broader group. So we have a Slack Beam design system that's open, that anybody can pose any questions, and we're constantly meeting with groups to collect feedback. I meet with some designers every Wednesday where Joelle and I will showcase what we're working on. And even recently we have designers, one of our great designers, David, he took on, hey, I'm really interested in doing tooltips. And so he went in and he did the whole process just like we did. He did the research, he gave us samples, he held meetings with Beam, us, the designers, the stakeholders, and we were able to review his thinking and where he was going with the component. And now that component has been published and is live for the whole team to use. So we encourage it because, I mean, as you saw with the work that Joelle is doing on forms, I mean, there's so much work. You cannot, two people cannot build a design system this large. It's one thing to build a component library for an application. It's just another beast to do it for, we have a suite of 30 to 40 applications that we're trying to design for. So, there's just a lot to consider. We're really trying to say, hey, can we make something like Carbon or Polaris, and be really working at that level?
And it's a way to share the way we do things. It's a way to share the way we work in Figma. I mean, it will be the same with Sketch, but that way we kind of communicate, the tips and the little trick, and everybody kind of learn from each other. And we are basically using the same methodology. So there's a lot of benefit on the top of it. I don't think when you look at Carbon or all this kind of, great company, they have a huge team. We are not. So, we are, leveraging any kind of effort, and, people being motivated can help. It's better that way.
That's great. It's definitely not, the whole design system definitely is not like a one-man show. It definitely needs team efforts and a lot of collaboration there. And you just show like the whole design system you guys have, and it's still, if I understand, it's still like growing and it's like work in progress. So I'm curious to know what are the challenges you guys are facing right now?
I mean, it's always a challenge switching applications, right? I mean, even today, I've been in Figma now for 5 months, and I'm still learning how to do things, right? I had to like do something in prototyping today, and I'm like, I don't know how to do this. I haven't been in this corner of the application much, and so I was using Sketch for 4 years, so you cannot replace 4 years of muscle memory and 4 years of research and usage in 6 months. Now, I think there's a lot we can carry over each application as shortcuts and methodologies of how things work, but I will be the first to say that auto layout is not easy. It is very challenging. I mean, it's pull your hair out challenging. So in the beginning, but once you start to understand it and get it, even when I get it, I don't get it, first of all. And then I'm like, oh, maybe if I just keep going, it will start to make more sense. But you know, it's really rewarding when it starts to work and you start to see the power of it, because it's, in my 20 years of designing, it's by far the coolest feature I've seen yet. So I'm really excited to push the limits of that and see what we're going to be able to do with it.
And you know, one of the challenges, you are kind of building the you know, you are building the railroad where you are on the, you know, when the train is kind of going so fast. So you know, we don't go fast enough, unfortunately. We wish it was going faster, but we do what we can. The great the chance we have is, you know, leadership is understanding what we, I mean, well, leadership wants this product, and they understand that the benefit of it. But for a big organization, you know, design system is becoming some kind of trendy word, and everybody now need a design system. But you know, not everybody understands what it is really, and sometimes to communicate that not to your direct leadership who understand, but to the rest of the company, it's an investment in terms of time and so budget. And you know, there is some people who don't understand exactly the value until they see it. And as you are starting to building it, and it's not a full-fledged product yet, you know, you still have to convince some people that it's the right approach. So you know, that's not only our challenge. It's you know, when you read about design system, it's always a challenge to be sure that everybody in the company really understand what is a design system and what are the benefits that you are going to get from it. Because at the beginning, it's kind of a big lift. It's a big investment with, you know, maybe at the beginning not a big reward, but we know that, you know, it's a long-term investment. So that's one of the challenge, you know, to just evangelize what you are doing and be sure that you know, nobody's going to pull the plug out at some point.
And it's adding to that, Joel, it's not all glorious work, right? Like the design system. I mean, writing documentation, I mean, in the beginning, figuring out naming conventions. I mean, you wouldn't believe that you could spend 2 weeks just talking about naming conventions and trying to get consensus with, are we using dashes, spaces, lowercase, uppercase, camel case? I mean, and all of us have bringing years of experience of doing certain patterns. And, you know, it's like building a system at this size, you have to be very consensus driven. You're not going to like every decision that's made. You got to know when to give, like, hey, I wouldn't do it that way, but I appreciate the way you did it, right? Like, you really have to have that attitude to build a system like this.
Yeah, since you bring up, like, I'm curious to know what's the name convention you guys use? What's the final decision there?
It started out all lowercase with dashes. Then we pivoted to, so for the applications themselves, I really was hardcore about just doing sentence case, because I just don't want to deal, like, I know a lot of great companies doing sentence case now. I'm super tired of like, make this, you know, camel case, oh, or use title casing here. Oh no, you're using AP title casing or not AP title casing. So sentence case is like the no-brainer, I think, for alleviating all of that for the system. And then for menus, we do use title casing for those, so that it feels human readable when you're using a menu in Figma, is how we've been kind of splitting it up. But yeah, there's lots of stuff like that, right? Like, what are you going to use for your grid system? So we're on an 8-pixel grid system, which we use 4/8 pixels, so that we can use 4 for vertical rhythms with baseline grids, which, you know, that's how we work to get the whole team measuring their components and their spacing between components the same ways.
And the naming system, the naming convention is a perfect example. Ramin and myself were absolutely 100% sure that we want kind of lowercase, dash, no space. And we have worked for, you know, 6 months like this, and some designer came back and, you know, fight us on this. And, you know, that's like children. You have to choose your battle. So and then at the end of the day, you know, being open-minded and to listen to other people is important. So, you know, I think Ramin and myself now are okay with it. But, you know, that's a kind of example where you need to, you know, listen to everybody's opinion and not be too stubborn on what you think is right.
Yeah, of course. So besides naming convention, like how do you guys handle with version controlling at Figma? Since everything is kind of auto-saved, like how do you keep tracking all the versions you did?
We actually haven't started using version. So we were very accustomed and getting pretty good with version control and Abstract. But the key difference between Abstract and Figma with version control is that with Figma, version control is an option. With Abstract, version control is mandatory. So if you want to work on something and you're going to make a change, you have to make a branch. So it's just like working, it's like using the GitHub workflow for developers. I want to make a change. I'm going to check out the branch, make my changes. I'm going to make commits to those. And now I'm going to go ahead and merge that back and pray that I don't have any conflicts. So you will go through that with Figma if you use it. And we believe that version control is going to be excellent for the design system, right? So if I have, for example, those alerts I'm working on, and then now we're like, hey, we've rolled that and published that out live to the team, but now we want to use toasts, add toasts to that. Now I would be able to take a branch, go work on the toasts while everybody is looking at the same version and documentation and not seeing the work that's being done. And then once I'm ready, now I could merge that back up to the design system, and then that would publish it back to all the designers. So the only reason we haven't started doing that yet is because it's just been such a massive lift that we've been working on. We just really haven't had time to be like, have that layer in the way yet. So I know that once we really get the design system going to that next level, it will be essential and it's going to just come in super handy. So I'm sure that there's designers out there that are loving it.
Yeah, and let me share this. I think let's dig into this real quick too. Like this is the and this is also the design system, but their versions obviously working in your files day to day, right? So this is from our way of working doc, which we've leaned on Spotify's documentation too, and the way we've organized our project spaces that our projects equal the products that they represent. And then we have a couple of different project types, right? So we have specs, and the specs equals production, right? So now that instead of master, which is Abstract, now specs equals production. So that's becoming our source of truth. And then design is where the design happens. But as we talk about, like, just if you wanted to start a new initiative or you're just exploring something, that's where that happens in Playground. So usually you kind of, I'm going down the other way, but really we go up, right? So we would start at Playground, we would move things into design where we're actually, validating and testing. And then as they go into production, in our code, that's when those files move into specs. So just want to call that out too from a day-to-day how our designers work.
Yeah, no, that's great, Cole. I mean, it's really more of a manual version control, right? So that as we finish up on a project, we got this, like Cole said, we leaned on Spotify, has a really great document you can find in community. And we basically looked at that and said, hey, this is really smart. We should use something like this. So then when you're done with that iteration, you can copy and paste those screens into that source of truth file. And why that's so great is now, Neil can just go ahead and hop in that file and be like, what's going on with my bias at? What's live today? And if you open that source of truth file, and there would be maybe another file like, how is the grid work for my bias at? And there would be documentation for how all those breakpoints work that we have in each spec folder. Yeah, we
definitely have to explore how branching might work in that context. I mean, it makes way more sense to apply to our design system. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be a trial and error is how do we might do branching.
Yeah, adding to that, I mean, I think that was what was so cool is that when you were forced to use branching, it really felt more like an obstacle, not a benefit. So I think that's the key distinction, right? So when I'm working on an app, in Abstract, it felt kind of something was in my way. I mean, I got good at doing it, but it was like, it wasn't. Now I just pop in a file, Cole pops in a file, we're in the same file, right? And, there's obstacles too with this whole multiplayer thing. I don't think, you have to have good communication with multiplayer, and you got to have maybe, I don't know if you have some more info on that, Cole, with like, our file etiquette and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna pull it up here. I'll just share this more broadly, but just to give you a quick look at the ways of working document. So this is what, and this is the takeaway is when we talk about, bringing teams on and the socialization of this concept. So once we decided to pull the trigger on this, we again leaned on Spotify's documentation, and we created this way of working doc. And this is what now we use to onboard team members and stakeholders. And in here, right, there is a little piece on multiplayer best practices, right? So we wanted to set up guardrails, right, and etiquette around, because this is a new concept, and everyone has different levels of comfort with this idea of people being in your files and watching and that kind of thing. So we wanted to be very clear as to how we should go about moving through people's files, and this idea of like, don't work on something that someone else is actively working on, make a copy to do your edits, introduce yourself with the cursor, which is, they've done a really good job with that in FigJam, where you have the cursor chat. So, and leaving comments. So so we definitely bake this into our way of working, into how people should sort of work or react when jumping into those files.
This is great, like having such a well-documented onboarding documents for stakeholders definitely can help push Figma to a larger scale within the organization, because Figma is not only famous for collaboration within the design team, but also famous for cross-functional collaboration. So which leads to my last question from me. Is how do you use Figma to work with other non-design stakeholders like devs and PMs? Besides the onboarding document, just show what the day-to-day collaboration looks like with those stakeholders.
Yeah, so we've got a bunch of stakeholders in making comments, but that's also the rub, is they're making comments on stuff that is maybe old, or it's on the wrong thing because we have files kind of spread out. So I don't know if we have a silver bullet answer for that yet, as much as it kind of goes back to this whole idea of this Figma swarm and having the squad stand up and answer, or be available to answer questions and bring people on as it sees fit. But that's kind of an ongoing challenge for us, is the best way of working and with stakeholders.
But the collaborative process is fantastic, right? I mean, I was in a FigJam with one of our engineers today. We had a Zoom going, but it was really all about having FigJam open, where I was, walking through some documentation, and to be able to just do it right there and have it both in the file, not having to branch or rely on a shared screen. I mean, we did experience some of this using Miro quite a bit as well, but that was the only multiplayer access I had up until that point. So the fluidity of having FigJam and Figma both in tabs that I can have instant access to, as far as working with engineers, whether it's documentation, and we haven't started a lot of complex development yet, but I can imagine it's going to be really great for going through and looking at inspect and walking devs through handoffs and things like that.
Yeah, just the commenting in files, like you're saying. I mean, that was kind of a pain point with Abstract, right? Was that the comments would happen in Abstract. You'd have to then open the sketch file and then kind of do this dance of matching up the comment with the with the point of comment in the file, and so now there's this a little bit more immediacy with that. Well,
and the game-changing thing to me about that is that InVision, Zeppelin, and Abstract, they all have this collection and export concept. So it's all about grooming your screens. Yeah, I have 50 screens. I have 10 I want to groom that I'm going to share and do. So there's positives and negatives to that. And you have to change the way you work in Figma, because now you can't just have all your screens in one place. You have to really use your pages in a more organized way, and your files in a more organized way, so that a person knows, a stakeholder knows where to look and how to get to that right page. I mean, Figma has some cool things like deep linking to pages and things like that. But part of me misses not the simplicity of the export, but the conciseness of it. But I'm learning that it hasn't really become too much of an obstacle if you organize your pages right.
I'm going to jump in there and add something that, and we've kind of touched on it a few times this evening. One of the reasons we were really attracted to Figma when we were looking at the pros and cons was this idea of having that single source of truth for all our documentation and all our work, whether it for every stage of the design process, right? So it's not just the final deliverable of the design, it's the prototype, it's the sketches, it's even the discovery, right? So FigJam, even before FigJam, but now FigJam's there, you can do a lot of your discovery work and synthesis work in there and have everything together in a place that all stakeholders on the team, not just the designers, not just the researchers on our team, but our key stakeholders, our product partners, our dev partners, our executive stakeholders, our business stakeholders, they're all getting in there and able to kind of take a look at everything. It really kind of lowers the walls around design, right? Design's not this ivory tower that people can't access. It's like we're democratizing it. We're letting people in. They're letting them see our work and see what we're doing, how we're doing it, when we're doing it, and kind of enjoying that process. So I think Figma's been key there.
Cool. We're kind of running over time for our panel. Now we're open floor to our Q&A. So if you have any questions for our speaker, feel free to continue typing in the chat or post a question in our FigJam. I'm now just gonna start asking questions from our audience. So the first one is from FigJam. Someone asked, how much time did you invest in migrating past the designs into Figma?
Well, I mean, we have so many designers. I guess it would be app specific, right? So I could only speak, hey, this is how long it took to recreate designs for the design system. But if you had an application that was maybe a SaaS platform you were building and you had 40 or 50 screens with a prototype that was pretty thorough, I mean, there's multiple ways to do that. You can either build from the place you're at and start to iterate from that point, and then build out your new system as you need things. Because just bringing in like 50 screens or 40 screens and then just doing a complete rebuild, that's just always going to take a long time. But if you do it right and you componentize it when you go, you're going to get faster. So I don't have a direct answer for that unless one of the guys does do.
No, I mean, there's never, I think what we've always said, there's never a perfect time to make a switch. So it's finding that opportunity where maybe if something's moving out of, production and there's maybe a lull in the action, so to speak, and there's an opportunity to start rebuilding some of that stuff. That would, so I think there's kind of this, as we all know with the flow of work, right, is if something's ramping up, it's probably like, yeah, not a good time to start moving your files, right? But as things are shipped and maybe there's a lull in the work, that would be a good time to start moving stuff over.
Yeah, I would be hesitant though to just bring in all 50 pages on an import and think you're not going to have your work cut out for you.
Yeah.
Totally. Next question is from Antonia. Did you develop a Figma onboarding process from non-UX staff? So I know you have shared the documentation, but is there any protocol or process you guys have for onboarding?
Yeah, definitely a next step for us. Obviously the way of working was more for the designers, even though yeah, so to answer the question simply, we have talked about doing trainings and lunch and learns and being more proactive about getting stakeholders and non-designers in. And I think FigJam has actually been a great tool for that, just to get people comfortable in a collaborative space.
Great. Next question also from Antonio. He asked, have you developed any new workflows as a result of adopting Figma?
I'll take a crack at that. I mean, definitely an informal one is the commenting, right? I think for me at least, working with the team, that ability to critique async, especially the time that we took this on, with everyone being remote already, and because of the COVID landscape that we found ourselves in, there was a lot more ability to critique and review and comment on work. I don't know that we've necessarily had any formal workflows yet, though, I wouldn't say.
I mean, it depends how we're looking at workflow. If we're just talking about like the way we make components, I mean, I will say that for like Joelle and myself and the rest of the team, it's way more fluid in Figma, right? Just that ability to jump in, leave comments. I mean, and we have designers in Dublin, like a bunch of designers in Dublin. I'll make comments at the end of my day. In the morning, I have all my answers. They're sitting there waiting. I mean, sure, you could do that in InVision, but then once I start my day and Joelle and I are hopping in a file, it's just, everything's just easier now with multiplayer. It's just made a huge difference.
Great. And someone from FigJam asked, what's the good size for design team to tackle a migration?
I think we had 5 or 6 team members that were dedicated to this. I think as you get, if you, that's probably a good amount. I think you start getting more, and then it becomes, you might not be able to chunk up the work, or it just starts to get maybe a little bit bloated. But you also, again, as we talked about earlier, you want to have the diverse, set of skill sets and perspectives, right? So you want to find that balance of getting enough people who are going to challenge the thinking, making sure you're solving the right problem, without creating bloat, without creating, roadblocks and, designing by consensus. So yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I should say we had 5 or 6, I think, at any given time.
Yeah, with all those different skills, right? We were able to tackle different issues because we had a variety of designers.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think the migration can be done from like one person to a large scale as long as you are dedicated to Figma. Next question is from Tyson. Do your engineering team members use Figma for handoff?
Or our engineering teams using Figma
Yeah.
for handoff? Yeah. I mean, we definitely, we groom our stories and we walk the developers through what we need, what's coming up next. I mean, I can only speak from the design system standpoint because I'm not an application designer currently, but I'm sure you guys are as well, right, Cole?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I mean, by nature of switching to Figma, they all kind of have to use Figma. But we have been exploring ways to sort of streamline handoff, and we're starting to put like event tracking documentation with their files. So, and they already have a great handoff with their sort of like auto redlining tool, that you can just hold command or option, I believe, and just grab red lines. And so they've done a great job of bringing a bunch of stuff out of the box. So yeah, our devs are definitely using it.
And do they like it? Like, what's the perception?
Yeah, actually, we had a number of engineers that were already using it. Again, this was the whole idea that everyone's sort of evaluating new tools. And so yeah, we had a number of people who had worked in it and were comfortable with it. We haven't had many issues with transitioning.
Cool. We have a few questions related to Figma org. So the first, how do you organize different teams, projects, and digital assets on Figma org? And then there's what was the plan to scale the design work in Figma org?
Well, I mean, I think we all kind of worked on this together, but we started by looking at just the org structure and saying how we wanted to divide. When you create like a project in were we going to make it app-based? Were we going to make it team-based? And then also where was the design system going to live? And then because each application is unique and is going to need its own component library for its complex components that are going to have nesting back to the root layer of Beam, we had to come up with an architecture that made sense so that, if Cole, for example, is working on my Viasat, him and I were working on that together when we were drafting some things for the design system. We had a component library that lives inside of his project, in his source of truth that he shared earlier. And then, that's going to have that card that has the custom text he needs with the buttons. But that button, if it's getting pulled in, is going to be pulling from Beam, which is an entirely different project. So you really, I think when you're dealing with 40 applications and, 20, 30 designers, you have to have a plan for how that structure is going to work, especially in something like the Figma org. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Cole?
No, I think that's great.
Cool.
That's a good point. Next question is from Aaron. Have you felt the fear of clicking the accept changes when reviewing component updates? Like, how did you deal with that fear?
What was the question again? Sorry.
Have you felt the fear of clicking the accept changes when reviewing?
Little box in the bottom right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not working on a lot of apps right now, so I think it's more the designers that would fear the changes coming in. But you know, we're very diligent about our review process. We don't just roll out a component willy-nilly, right? We like really look into what is the impact of this going to be, and then we're not far enough along, I would say. And I would also add to that, maybe somebody else could speak to this, but the overrides are pretty forgiving in Figma. They're not like Sketch. Sketch was a very rigid system where you could control overrides of what can be changed, what can't be changed, which, by the way, there was good things about that. So I think there's some pros and cons. Sometimes I'll look at something and be like, I cannot believe this override did not follow through here. And then I just forget how it works, right? So there's pros and cons. It's slippery a little bit. So you got to get to know it. So I never fear that because I always have undo, right? So if I publish it and the design explodes, they can always undo or go back in the version history. And then, you know, they would let us know if we rolled out a component, people accept the changes and we blow things up. It's going to be much scarier, by the way, on the code side than our side, a lot more. And so, well, you know, they'll be able to hit us up in our Slack channel, and then Joelle and I would look at and assess what the issue was that caused it. We can roll that change back or roll back a version. So there's a lot of different ways we can deal with that kind of problem.
So kind of run out of time. Let's just answer the last question from Big John. How do you retire old components and tell devs about it?
Retire old components?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Joelle, you want to take that one?
Yeah, maybe we will have this concern in 2 years.
Exactly.
Right now we have nothing to retire.
Yeah, we need more, right?
Yeah.
Creating these components, that will be a thing, right? So it's not a funny question. That will be a thing at one point. And if I was going to retire, we wouldn't throw anything away, right? Like we would archive it. We would notify the team that it was going to be dead. You know, we would be taking that thing away. And even if we take it away, it's not going to affect their file, because their file, then that will just become parsed in their file and it just sits there as is. So there's a lot it would be more about the communication of how we roll out the new thing, and then make sure we archive that so that we never lose history of what we had. But yeah, I can't, it's hard to think of the day when we won't need to make more components rather than putting some away.
I will say that we are excited, and we have not had time to dig into it, but we are excited to dig into the design system analytics, and that would give insight into whether or not, you know, components are being broken or just not being used, and that might inform decisions around, you know, what, like, again, in 2 years from now, but what we might, you know, shelve or change, or, you know, needs a little bit of help. So if you haven't looked into that, I definitely recommend checking out the design system analytics. It's very powerful. Yeah, we're definitely sticking to it.
Well, thank you all for answering those questions. We still have a lot of questions left. So if you guys want to stay a little bit in the network, you are welcome to do so. But now I'm going to hand over back to Aaron.
Chantal, thank you so much. And thank you, panelists, Neil, Ramin, Joelle, Cole. Thank you so much. I mean, this has been very enlightening, and I hope that others really found a lot of value. I think it's something that I want to say again, and I know, Ramin, you brought this up, that you guys have been doing this for 5 months or so, coming up on 6 months. So this is
for Figma, yeah.
Yeah, so it's something that's relatively new. And so I think that it's pretty impressive what you guys have migrated and how you've done it. And sharing that story and that journey is so important to people who might not yet be there, who are thinking about making that leap. So, you know, thank you so much for walking us through that. I mean, we do have a ton of questions we didn't get to, and I want to thank the audience for participating, creating some amazing Magic the Gathering cards, telling us about themselves, as well as contributing questions throughout the session. The only other announcements I would say from Friends of Figma before I hand it over to Antonio for any remarks from SDXD would be, we're still learning and we're still trying to put together the best events possible for the community around Figma and FigJam. If anyone has any feedback on this, any recommendations for future events, other topics they'd like to cover, please, I'll put my email in the FigJam and in the chat. Please I'd love to hear from you and connect with you either via email or on LinkedIn. But we're always trying to improve these, and it's really for the community to add as much value as possible. So thanks again to everyone, and I'll turn it over to Antonio for any remarks from him.
Of course, yeah. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks. Thanks again to Friends of Figma and Aaron for helping us put on this event, and we're leading this event. And yeah, and thanks to the panel, thanks to Neil, Ramin, Joel, Cole, and that was amazing insights. The company I worked for as well, transitioned maybe a year and a half ago. So it was really interesting to hear your perspective and hear your journey. I'm curious now to hear journeys from other people. So that's awesome. And last but not least, thank you, Chantel. That was awesome moderating and great questions. Round of applause.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, and thanks everyone for attending. It was awesome having you. You make these events possible. We'll have a post-event networking. So we'll give us a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we can do breakout rooms. And yeah, we're always available for questions if you have any as well. So thanks again, and thank you, Aaron, again.